Hello everyone and welcome to the Reddit Railway. My name is Victor and I'll be your driver. Today I have a collection of customer submitted stories to share, so all aboard! I used to work as a ride operator at a theme park. It wasn't a world famous theme park, but it was popular in our city. We had your traditional rides, the Ferris wheel, the roller coaster, and a miniature railroad. There were two engines that ran the railroad, and they had names. The blue one was called Angel, and the red one was called James, but not after the Thomas character. He was named after a maintenance worker that used to work there. To operate the trains, a ride operator needed to have a driver's license. I was one of the older ride operators there, and I already had my license compared to the teenagers that were mostly hired. Most operators didn't learn the train until about 6 to 12 months after being hired, but I really wanted to drive the trains as it was my childhood dream. So after 3 months of hard work, I finally got trained and certified to drive the trains. I have two stories, one for each engine. Angel was a sweetheart. When I drove her, she would always run smoothly with no issues at all. But I'm sorry to say I came across one of those customers one night. You know what I'm going to call this woman, Karen. Apparently, Karen's mother was visiting from Scotland and she wanted to show her mother what it was like to ride on the train. Unfortunately, she had 5 people in her party. Her mother, her husband, and 2 kids, but only 3 tickets. I told her that only 3 people could ride. Karen tried to explain but got all pissy when I told her I wasn't allowed to let her on. At this point, I decided to call my supervisor on my radio and informed him of the situation, but Karen decided to let her family get on the train anyway. I was annoyed, but I couldn't do anything yet at this point. I placed my hand on Angel's cab in frustration as the supervisor wouldn't come out for some stupid reason. He told me to repeat what I had said, so I did. He told me not to let her on, and knowing she got on the train, I told her he said so. She said I told her she could, and I replied, no, I didn't, and she uttered those fateful words, "Let me talk to your manager." I smiled with glee. Now I had an excuse for him to come out, but the ticket manager came out instead. "Ma'am, you can't ride without a ticket. Now you're more than welcome to leave, but you're not getting a refund." Karen went ballistic. She and her husband followed him back to the ticket booth, and she was yelling at him. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but apparently the manager had enough and called security. And wouldn't you know it, Karen and her husband came back with their 2 tickets, talking as if nothing had happened. At least I got to drive Angel that night, so I was able to enjoy the ride as much as the passengers. Now on to James. James was a bit of a pain in the neck, at least for me. He was used the most and he gave me a hard time nearly every time I had to drive him. When I first started driving him, he would constantly refuse to start up, and I had to keep turning the key in order to get him to move. Eventually, the maintenance guys had to turn the key, or one of the managers did, making me look bad. One time, James stopped on the side of the park where the station wasn't and wouldn't start up again. It turned out one of the brake pipes on one of the coaches burst, and this caused the whole train to stop. My manager had to get the train moving again, but it was a struggle. James moved very slowly and his engine was hot by the time we got back to the station. I remember one time in particular that was the worst. In my early days, I accidentally drove James with the parking brake on, causing him to overheat and smoke as he struggled to pull the train. He wanted to pay me out and soon he got his chance. One morning I had to do the morning checklist. I remember that I had to check the fire extinguishers. There was one in the first car behind James himself and there was another at the station. I was sitting on James to check and make sure he turned on properly and waited a few seconds to see if he moved. The motor came on but James didn't budge. I got off James, but as soon as I was done checking the fire extinguisher, someone called out to me, and my face went pale as I saw James slowly backing out of the station, as if to say, "Have fun getting fired, sucker." I saw a different manager, a cool one thankfully, and she climbed onto James and tried to put the brakes on. That didn't work, so she turned the key and James finally stopped. I was scared that I was going to either lose my certification or get fired. Thankfully, neither one happened. On my last day, I requested that I get to run the railroad, as it was my favorite ride, but instead of Angel, I was put on James. Ironically, he didn't give me any problems that day. He ran smooth as a sailboat, as if to say he was sorry for everything he did. Nothing went wrong that day, apart from some guests standing at the crossing constantly. It was a busy day. Those are my stories of how I accomplished my childhood dream of driving trains, and the adventures I had with them. I hope you enjoyed. I did, and I'm very jealous. Getting to drive a train of any size sounds awesome. Regarding your first story, fuck you, Karen. No ticket, no ride. It's not rocket science. The second story sounds like James was a bit of a smartass. At least you didn't get sacked. Thanks for sharing, OP. A few months ago, I was working at the London Duathlon. This is an event where you run, then cycle, then run again. It took place in a London park. Early in the day, I was manning a road corner where I would help pedestrians cross the road safely in between the groups of runners and cyclists. I had already told a few people to vacate the road before the event, and all of them had been very polite and cooperative, all except one. I saw an incredibly muscular, athletic man running down the path towards me. "Hi sir, I'm really sorry, but it's the London Duathlon today, so the road is closed." "Nah, it's fine." "But sir, it's fine." And he ran off. Sometime later, me, my supervisor, and a security person were working on the crossing, and my supervisor mentioned there was a bloke on the course, so the man hadn't gone away yet. And shortly after that, along he came again, running down the path even though the event had started, and the cyclists were having to swerve to avoid him, so he was putting all the participants at risk. When he came along, the older two men with me yelled at him, "All right, mate, I will pull you off if I have to. You know how much trouble you're causing?" And what was his response? Same as before. "Nah, it's fine." Then he ran off again. Basically, he went running all over the course and everyone was telling him to get off, but he rudely ignored all of them. At least two people, my supervisor included, chased after him on bikes to try and catch him. But they couldn't. That's how fast a runner he was, so he got away scot-free. This park is in a very rich area of London, so maybe he was an entitled rich dude used to getting his own way. If this was in a rich part of London, probably, or maybe he was just a dick. Either way, it's a bummer he got away. This'll only embolden him in future. One can always hope he learns to stop being a wanker, or gets hit by a bus, whichever comes first. I was traveling to Bolivia for the summer of 2013. We started PE class and we were given yo-yos. No clue why they gave it to us, but I got one. After a while, I tried to do a trick and cracked it. At least I could tell the difference between mine and everyone else's. When school was over, a girl walked up to me saying, "That's my yo-yo." I said it isn't, and she immediately took me to the principal's office. The principal took my side, surprisingly. The girl was not happy and cried to her mum. So, out of guilt, I gave her my yo-yo. After that, I wanted to make sure I never saw her again, but my teacher then said I was going to be her partner. I didn't like it, but after a while I started actually liking her, and unfortunately it was sadly time for me to return to the USA, but not until I asked her on a date. After that, we became great friends and we still talk and FaceTime, despite us being in two different places. A happy ending then. However, you made a mistake giving her your yo-yo. Guilt should never be the motivation for doing something nice. But hey, at least you got something out of it, so well done, OP. Best of luck to the pair of you. Anyway, we've come to the end of our journey. Thank you for traveling on the Reddit Railway, and we hope to see you again soon.